So, good afternoon again. The title of this presentation is a refresher training on CAP Editor. My name's Elliot Christian. So before diving into our major topics, I just wanted to introduce my company, alerthub.org CIC. CIC stands for Community Interest Company. So we're a very small nonprofit company. Our goal is to help countries assure that people in harm's way get timely and effective emergency alerts so that they can protect lives and livelihoods. We offer two products. CAP Editor makes it easy to create and publish CAP alerts on an internet news feed, and our CAP Alert Hub aggregates published CAP alert news feeds at any scale. Now, both of these are freeware, and both are also supported as cloud-based services. This is an outline of our major topics in this presentation. I'm going to start with general topics and then dive into more detail. I've already given my introduction here. Now I want to sketch some context. These are my 5 points under the heading of context. I want to start with the Global Digital Compact, the UN Early Warnings for All initiative, the call to action on emergency alerting, and then I'll talk about uptake of the CAP standard worldwide and where we stand now with CAP Editor uptake. So the Global Digital Compact, the GDC, this will be agreed prior to the UN Summit of the Future this September. The GDC will outline shared principles for an open, free, and secure digital future for all. The CAP community compiled 82 endorsements of our input to the GDC. And that input simply says, include this statement in the GDC. Timely warning of life-critical emergencies is essential for public communication services. So our thinking here is people everywhere benefit from the emergency warning capabilities that are built into radio and television, cell broadcast technology, the intelligent transportation system, and many other public communication services. But we also know emergency warning is not a built-in feature of video streaming or social media and many other technologies that people use routinely. Future public communications services are likely to continue this hit or miss support for emergency warning, and it seems the GDC might be our best chance to influence that future. So if Burundi sends a delegation to the Summit of the Future this year, please be sure they push for including this sentence in the GDC. These are the endorsements for those 82 organizations. These are their logos of those who endorsed our input to the GDC. You probably recognize many of these. There's World Meteorological Organization. There's the International Telecommunications Union, GSMA, etc. Now, moving to my second point under context. You may have heard of the UN Action Plan on Early Warnings for All. That plan was launched in 2022 at the Conference of the Parties to the Convention on Climate Change. The plan calls for new investments of $3.1 billion to achieve its goal, which is to ensure every person on Earth is protected by early warning systems within 5 years. The action plan is organized in 4 pillars. We're concerned with pillar 3, which addresses the dissemination and communication of warnings. One of the actions in that dissemination communication pillar is and I quote, establish CAP editor and alert hub to further enhance multi-hazard CAP-based emergency alerting. So CAP editor and alert hub, as I mentioned, are both provided by my nonprofit company, alerthub.org. Our CAP editor freeware is in operational use today by 63 countries and 20 are testing it. Our Alert Hub freeware is aggregating emergency alerts today from 231 CAP alert feeds. One of the outcomes in the dissemination and communication pillar is, and again, I quote, all countries have the capability for effective, authoritative emergency alerting that leverages the common alerting protocol suitable for all media and all hazards. This actually restates exactly the call to action on emergency alerting. And that's my third point under the context. So this call to action was endorsed by 20 international organizations, international NGOs, and international companies involved in emergency alerting. And they're shown here by their logos. The 7 companies include Intersect, Medio Blue, Google, Everbridge, AccuWeather, Open Broadcaster, and of course, alerthub.org. There are also endorsements by 10 major international organizations. TISA is the Traveler Information Services Association. Then we see the World Broadcasting Union, the Asia Pacific Broadcasting Union, the European Emergency Number Association, the International Association of Emergency Managers, Medio Alarm, ITU, the Open Commons Consortium, the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, UNDRR, and WMO's logo is in the lower right. We have a couple of NGOs and standards groups, and IFRC, you may know, stands for International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. And we also have an endorsement by OASIS, which is a standards group. Also, we have an individual there on the second row. That's Vint Cerf, widely regarded as the father of the internet. He endorsed as himself. Our fourth point under context is to give you this global view of CAP implementations worldwide right now. 91% of the world's population lives in a country with at least one national CAP news feed operator, which is 86%, or green on this map, or in testing now. That's the other 5%, yellow on this map. And of course, Burundi's included. Countries shown in gray haven't yet begun testing CAP as far as I know. A large percentage of these are least developed or developing countries. And sadly, of course, those are often countries that are especially vulnerable to disaster. My fifth and last point under context is to give you a report on the uptake of this CAP editor tool. As I mentioned, the CAP editor freeware is in operational use by 63 countries and territories. They are publishing 121 CAP alert feeds. There are more than 600 persons in the role of composer or approver across those 63 alerting authorities. The CAP editor itself is initialized for 379 alerting authorities spanning 205 countries and territories. But this includes only those alerting authorities that I'm guessing might want to use CAP editor. So I don't include, for example, those who've already implemented CAP some other way. But it is fairly easy for me to add any other alerting authority. So keep that in mind if you want to add something else from Burundi. Right now, the CAP editor interface is supporting 32 languages. It's fairly easy, again, for me to add any other language. But of course, that assumes I can get help from some volunteer who understands that language. So each alerting authority using CAP Editor becomes part of the Alert Hub. And being part of the Alert Hub is our next topic. Here I want to mention WMO Alert Hub sources, some major republishers, and the Common Policies and Practices document. So the WMO Alert Hub is aggregating emergency alerts from 231 CAP feeds published by 146 countries, territories, and other sources. So if you click on that link when you have this document yourself, you can see the ones that are currently active. The JSON file, and again, the link there is given to it, includes the email address of the technical contact for each source. And again, the WMO Alert Hub is operated by my company, alerthub.org CIC, on behalf of U.S. government support to the World Meteorological Organization, WMO. You may also know that the WMO Alert Hub is a core component of WMO's Global Multi-Hazard Alert System, or GMAS. The major republishers of CAP feeds that are aggregated by this Alert Hub are AccuWeather, Esri, Google Public Alerts, IFRC Alert Hub, Meteo Alarm, Meteo Blue, Traveler Information Services Association, windy.com, WMO Alert Hub and WMO GMAS, and the WMO Severe Weather Information Service. Now here I also want to mention Google Public Alerts has a few requirements beyond just publishing valid CAP alerts. Also, some of these publishers are likely to insist that an alerting authority has a record of publishing alerts of high quality before they will republish your alerts. For example, it might be required to have already published more than, say, 100 CAP alerts. Now, as I understand it, Burundi to date has not published any CAP alerts. So that's something for you to keep in mind. You're going to need to publish some alerts. They don't have to be high severity. They can be some routine thing, like maybe cold or rainy weather, whatever you think is appropriate, but it's important to get some out there. I also want to mention, again, the Traveler Information Services Association. They have already demonstrated use of CAP to disseminate alerts to in-vehicle navigation systems. And I'm told that capability will be operational soon by some major manufacturers of automobiles and trucks worldwide. Also, Esri, this is the dominant company in the field of geographic information systems, GIS. Esri recently built a CAP connector that turns a CAP feed into a dynamic real-time GIS feature set. And for that, they are demonstrating it using the output of our Alert Hub. This is going to be a very powerful way to link CAP to emergency operations centers, which might exist at the city or province or national level, for example. Now, the Common Policies and Practices document, it's available at that link, contains guidance compiled across several republishers. The primary intent is to increase harmonization among those CAP services, and hopefully it will also be useful to developers of other CAP-enabled emergency alerting systems and tools for creating, publishing, or using CAP alerts. The document presents topics in 3 groups. First, there's matters pertinent to the individual CAP alert, then CAP alert feed topics, and then additional dissemination modes beyond the CAP feed, which of course includes CAP alert hubs. Here I also mentioned Hong Kong Observatory has created a CAP checker tool. This tool will evaluate CAP feeds course, limited to only those that are compiled by the Severe Weather Information Center, or SWIC. That's basically everything that is meteorological in its focus. They don't, for example, include earthquakes. So if you want to see the CAP alert that may be flagged by CAP Checker, you would use this tool, but when you go to the individual CAP alert, use Control-U to show the source. That's because it's a style sheet not available from the same source that's giving you the information. So it's the style sheet isn't rendered. Okay. I want to discuss briefly the International Register of Alerting Authorities. In the Register of Alerting Authorities, each permanent representative with WMO establishes and maintains records for his or her country. You ought to be aware of how many alerting authorities there are for your country. And here I would mention, for example, Aruba. Aruba is a small country in the Caribbean, and because they have several different organizations that can issue alerts, they've decided we don't need to burden the public by knowing the fire department and the weather department and the health department. So they simply created one and will rename their entry in the Register of Alerting Authorities to be Alerts Aruba. You might want to consider the same thing. So Burundi doesn't have to have a separate feed for Met Service versus emergency management or health department or transportation. You could just bundle them together in any way that you want. It's entirely at the discretion of your permanent representative, which is DEO, I believe. Another thing you need to be aware of, how many languages are needed for your CAP feeds. Average is 2 across the world. Some places like Switzerland have 5, but a lot of other ones have only 1. So it averages out to about 2 per country. Also, think about, does your CAP feed URL appear in your register record? Now, I've already checked for you, and Burundi does already have your CAP feed URL. If you ever do want to change that, you would contact Donna Robertson Quimby at WMO Secretariat. Okay, let me move on now. I want to make a few notes about the CAP editor tool in general. These are the matters that I want to mention with regard to the CAP editor tool, and I'll have a slide on each one. As you should know, anyone can try out the CAP editor in the role of guest, but a guest user of CAP editor cannot save a draft CAP alert or publish a CAP alert. Those actions require a password, and that password is set only by a person who the alerting authority had designated to perform those actions. In the CAP editor tool, authorized users are people defined in either the composer or the approver role. Really, the only difference is an approver has all the composer abilities plus the publish alert ability. The username associated with your password must be that user's personal email address. It cannot be a role name such as forecaster or shift supervisor. And each composer and approver sets his or her own password. That password must be kept private, never shared with others. I, as the administrator, do not know it. The only person who knows it is the person who set it. If you forget it, let me know and we'll delete you and you'll create a new one. The username and password for each composer and approver is registered to the user group, which means it's not specific to a language. So if you have more than one language for your CAP alerts, you don't have a separate username and password for each language. You just have one for each alerting authority and use that across all the languages. So an alerting authority using CAP editor must designate at least one approver, because remember, that's the only one who can publish CAP alerts. I actually recommend at least one approver per shift in case an alert needs to be issued quickly. There is no maximum for the number of approvers that you have. Now, with respect to composers, there's also no maximum, but there's also no minimum. You don't have to have any composers if you don't want to. CAP feeds generated with CAP Editor have a 2-week cutoff for recent alerts. And the way that's accomplished is as a program that runs daily, and it checks each alert and removes anything that's more than 2 weeks old, or what you might call stale alerts. If you do want to get copies of any CAP alerts you've ever published, just let me know. I do have those, even though they're not showing, they're available in our archive, and I'll get them for you. When initializing a new CAP alert, you can select from any of the listed draft alerts, which you probably are familiar with seeing that, where you just click on which one you want. But also notice at the top, you can instead initialize from any CAP alert found anywhere. You do that using the Choose File option. Of course, that means you must have already put those CAP alerts in a known location, maybe on your local drive, or really any internet file, because Choose File accepts a URL as well. That chosen CAP alert that you found somewhere else, maybe another country or whatever, can have extra elements. Those will just be ignored. So use any CAP alert. Also, if you choose a CAP alert that is missing some of the elements that we need in CAP Editor, don't worry about it. Those will be defaulted or left in. Now, CAP Editor offers Google CAP Validator as an extra feature, but know that the CAP validation is actually running internally whenever you try to save the alert. So the Google CAP Validator does warn of certain conditions that are allowed by CAP, but not by Google CAP guidance. One example here, Google requires an email address in the CAP sender value. So the CAP standard says you have to have a value in the sender. Google says that has to actually be in the format of an email address. Values of CAP elements are always plain text. The text strings cannot be formatted. In other words, do not try to use a new line or a bullet list or bold or underscore and so on. You cannot use HTML format or something called Markdown to try to format these strings. The strings are simply treated as plain text. Now I want to turn to a topic that's often misunderstood: how to update a CAP alert. According to the CAP standard, you can use the cancel value of message type only if you are updating an alert that was published in error. You use the update value of message type if you want to form a chain of CAP alerts stemming from the first alert message type. And then when the emergency situation concludes, the last alert in the chain either expires on its own, and of course that chain could be just one alert, and it just has an expires date. But if you have updates to that, the last one in the chain would have update as its message type and the response type of all clear. So do not use cancel when what you really mean is all clear. Okay? In other words, the situation that we predicted did not happen, or the situation did happen and now the storm or whatever it is over. So that's the all clear. I want to highlight a few rules for the CAP alerting area as it's supported in the CAP editor tool. Whenever you're publishing an alert using CAP editor, you should always have one contiguous area per CAP alert. The CAP editor mapping tool provides 3 base map options. One is the Esri, one's Google, which is actually a satellite view, and then we have OpenStreetMap, OSM. When you use the Esri, you see the place names on that map according to what language your browser is using. With OpenStreetMap, OSM, you see the place names according to the primary language at the place you're viewing on the map. So as you move around the world, you see the place names keep changing. You're free to change between these views, these base maps, while composing the alert. But be aware, whoever receives your alert was going to see that area displayed on some other base map. For example, if their in-car or in-truck navigation system is taking the alerts, they'll see it on the default map that they're looking at. And of course, if you're getting it on your cell phone with Google Maps, you'll see it on the Google Maps interface. Your CAP alert must always include the area desk or area description text, and it must always include either a polygon or a circle. And if you have both, do not overlap those, because Google requires that anytime you have more than one area, they must not overlap. That area desk, area description, text value cannot exceed 50 characters. If you try to put it in longer, you'll get a warning message from CAP Editor. The CAP Editor does check for the polygon winding order automatically, and you'll get an information note when CAP Editor goes ahead and reverses the order of the vertices, because it's going to assume that you always mean the area within the polygon you just drew, even if you draw it in the clockwise order, which technically, according to GIS, Geographic Information Systems, that means everywhere on Earth except the area you just outlined. So the CAP Editor automatically fixes that. One other thing, be aware, the circle radius cannot be 0. And of course, that would be a point, not a circle. Remember that the area in a CAP alert specifies where people are to be warned. If you make it a point, you're warning nobody. That area must not be used to specify a point such as the epicenter of an earthquake, the inception point of a fire, the location of an air quality sensors, or any such point location. And those are real examples where that mistake is being made. So just don't use 0 radius when you do a circle. Now, I want to mention some rules for other CAP elements. The CAP sender value, as I mentioned before, should be an email address. Google actually requires that. And it is preferred that that email refers to a help desk function, something that is continuously staffed. Do not put the name of an individual there, because you never know when these alerts are going out. And you have to have somebody who's not only, I would say, tracking and responding, but keeping a record of who asked what to that help desk. The CAP response type. It's an optional value, but providing the response type is highly recommended. When you use the response type, it's a pull-down list. So you're giving something that can be processed across all languages. So that makes it much easier for the receivers to understand how to handle your alert. The CAP event value must not exceed 35 characters. The CAP editor will give you a warning if you try to enter a longer text. Ideally, that event value would be selected from a list of event terms. And that's something you want to discuss there in Burundi. What will you use as your list of event terms? Now, there is a convention among CAP implementers that a high priority CAP alert has urgency and severity and certainty, all three in the top 2 levels. And that means, in English, people need to act within 1 hour. That's high urgency, 1 hour. The emergency is severe or extreme. That's high severity. And the officials are at least 50% certain, high certainty. In effect, we say this kind of alert is siren worthy. It would go, for example, to every cell phone of people in the alerting area. The CAP onset value is optional. Please leave it blank unless you actually need to specify the onset of an event that is not happening for some time, like tomorrow or later today, something like that. The CAP expires value, please always include it in the alert. The CAP editor will make the value of that default to the sent time plus 2 days. You want to probably change that for something like a flash flood. Probably 2 hours makes more sense than 2 days. But maybe for a drought, 2 days is right, or you could even be longer. The CAP headline, that text must not exceed 140 characters. The text of the headline should mention what is the emergency, where and when the emergency is happening. So that's a lot to squeeze into 140 characters, but please try to get all those things in there. For some people getting your alert, the headline is all they'll see when it shows up on their display or their cell phone. For the CAP description and instruction, I would encourage you to check out the linked text suggestions. There's 2 separate sources. One is the IFRC, Red Cross Red Crescent Societies. Another one is a set of text suggestions that were agreed among a bunch of countries in the Caribbean. CAP has a web element. The value of that is optional, and please leave it blank unless you actually have something more specific than this alert. Do not simply put the home page of your agency on the web. Remember, people are stressed. They're trying desperately to find information about what's happening because you're disrupting their life, particularly if it's a high priority alert. So do not send them on a wild goose chase to start going through your website unless you really have something very specific. And in that case, put that specific URL rather than have them using their precious time to be jumping around on your website. The CAP contact value is also optional. Now again, leave it blank unless you have something more specific as a contact than the sender. Remember, the sender is going to have like a help desk. So maybe the help desk is not quite good enough if you have, I don't know, maybe a chemical spill. Maybe you have an expert that knows about chemical safety data sheets and could give specific advice about how to treat a situation of that chemical spill. So that would be a good time to put in a more specific content. But again, do not just repeat the value of the sender. That's not being helpful. My last major topic here is some suggestions for ways that you could customize your copy of CAP Editor. As mentioned earlier, you might want to have some CAP alerts kept in a known location that you can access. You can think of these as templates or best practices or ideal text, but you would just put those someplace where you can get to them. You may, in your office, have a network drive, maybe where you do your timesheets or something. Put those alerts somewhere on that and then tell everybody, hey, you want to do your CAP alerts, you can just go over to our drive in or whatever it is. That file can be either a local file, as I said, on your local area network, or an internet file accessible by a URL. So just put them in a known place and then tell everybody where they are. You can also add your own pick lists of values for certain CAP elements, like the event. Remember, we talked about the event type. So this is like the word flood or fire or COVID or whatever you want to have. Make a list of that, and then as a text file, just put that somewhere. Then tell people that, oh, when you're doing event, you can just open another window and go look at those, cut and paste it right into your CAP alert. Same with contact. If you have a few contacts that are especially adept or especially appropriate for certain kind of conditions, put those, and that's a name and email address, put those somewhere where people can just pick them out so they don't have to try to remember them or put little stickies on their computer about where those are. Same with that web. Maybe you have, for example, a webcam that is at a major bridge that often has problems when there's a flood situation, if they close that bridge. Put the webcam address in a place, and then you can just pop that right into the web element, which would be very useful for people looking at that kind of an alert. You can add place footprints. So these are commonly used polygons. Maybe you have a watershed that is prone to flooding, have that outline already ready to go, and then people can cut and paste that actual polygon value, and it's the vertices, those lat long. They can just cut and paste that right into CAP Editor. Again, you'd put those in a known location so you can access that from another tab or window in your browser. You can also customize your XML style sheets. And remember, you have one of those for each language that you're using. If you take a look at the current style sheets for both your RSS feed and your CAP alerts, you'll see that in the style sheet, there's some notes indicating where you could insert header and footer HTML. So the style sheet is changing the XML into HTML. You probably have for your agency a standard header, standard footer. You can put those into your CAP alerts and your CAP feed as well. If you do want to change that, feel free to do so and then just send it to me so that I can install them in the place they need to be. Okay, those are my major topics. So we have another 15 minutes, open time for any questions or matters for discussion that come to your mind.
Yes, thank you very much, Ms. Elliot, for this presentation and the process how can do common narrating protocol. The question about the first question, but I started to thank you how you plan to refresh our memory, how we will do that in the few time, and then maybe endorse our CAP, and also to publish it to see Burundi on the system.
Right.
The first question, yeah.
Oh, I was going to say we can walk through that right now if you want.
Yeah, no, yeah. The first question, but I started to talk about it. Also, Burundi, when we expect some severe event, especially for heavy rainfall, which can cause flooding. We are working together with Red Cross, disaster risk reduction, also the international organization, which our focus, they use it for anticipatory action. We are working together and discuss, for example, for last seasonal focus, we are organize a national conference to discuss the focus in different locations which we expect, for example, the heavy rainfall, to prepare everything to help people when the preparedness to respond to the disease hazard. We are working back at the challenge which we had before. We don't display our warning system and in your system. But first question about that, National Meteorological Service website to display our CAP. About if we make a CAP, approval automatically when they finish, computer finish to do RF, approval automatically get the draft in his email. This is another question that I have. That one, you can respond, and maybe my colleague also ask a question. Thank you again.
Okay, I don't understand. The question that you're saying is, what happens when the approver issues an alert?
Yeah. About approve after finish to make a discard, automatically the draft will go to the email of approver.
You do not need to use email. There is an option for you to send a draft email, but you can, if you're an approver, you can just approve the alert.
Okay. If you don't have a website, how can we display it?
If you're saying Burundi Met Service does not have a website?
Not yet, because it's not operational now.
I'm not understanding. Let me just show you how this works.
No.
I think, Elliot.
Yeah.
I think when a composer do that, do a composer, if a composer finish, the approver go to connect on the system, and he see the system in the approver. Then after that, he approve what a composer did. Thank you.
So the composer saved the draft alert.
Yeah.
And the composer needs to tell an approver, hey, this one's ready to go.
Yeah.
And the approver comes in, looks in the drafts, and it should be the most recent one, so it'll be the first one. Looks at it, the approver can change it, or the approver could just hit publish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So here I am at the site for the CAP editor. And if we go down to Burundi, we use the CAP editor, which is in this, either in English or French. And then when you issue the alert, it's going to be in the feed like this.
To log in.
You have not issued any, so it's blank. But this URL right here, you can put that on your website, And then anybody who clicks on that will see your alerts. Anybody can subscribe to that as well, because it's an RSS feed. So that's how you hook this up to your website, whatever other dissemination you have. Make sense?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay.